Malaysia can help reduce tensions between superpowers. Rainy season in war-ravaged Gaza sparks flooding. You're watching World Today with me, SAHIH. Middle powers like Malaysia can help reduce tensions between major powers such as the United States and China as they approach relations both pragmatically and judiciously. Speaking at a special lecture entitled Superpower Rivalry and Rising Tensions in the Asia-Pacific at the University of California, Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim said he does not believe armed conflict between major powers is inevitable.
We will work with ASEAN to minimize risks, namely outright conflict or the bifurcation of the global economy into rigid blocks. Neither seems likely soon, but both have become plausible under today's mounting pressure.
Dato Sri Anwar also said there remains space to pursue robust relations with both the US and China, particularly in spheres like climate change, the energy transition, education and people-to-people ties that offer room for cooperation. Recognizing that contradictions will inevitably emerge, he said, Malaysia still sees value in engaging both Washington and Beijing. Meanwhile, Dato Sri Anwar said the humanitarian crisis in Palestine is poised to affect not just Palestine or the broader West Asia, but also leave an imprint on global relations for many years to come. According to the Prime Minister, Malaysia has consistently called for a ceasefire and a stop to the incessant bombing of Gaza.
As I had declared in the Malaysian Parliament, there are no two ways about it. We condemn terrorism in all its forms, and we categorically condemn the actions of killing innocent lives and taking women and children as hostages. Likewise, we unequivocally condemn the bombings of civilians, of homes, of hospitals, and the consequential atrocities against innocent lives. Children, women, and men being carried out day and night in Gaza with impunity.
Dato Sri Anwar said that Malaysia views this as a humanitarian crisis precipitated by a brutal and indiscriminate war. Ultimately, he said the humanitarian crisis in Palestine isn't about religious beliefs. After all, the more than 11,300 victims in Gaza comprise Muslims and Christians as well as nationalities of various countries. President Joe Biden said that the United States was not seeking to distance itself from China, but in fact wanted an improved relationship as he prepared for a highly anticipated summit with President Xi Jinping in San Francisco. The two leaders will meet on the sidelines of the APEC summit in California for their first encounter in a year, as trade tensions, sanctions, and the question of Taiwan have fueled quarrels between the world's largest economies.
To get back on a normal course of corresponding, being able to pick up the phone and talk to one another if there's a crisis, being able to make sure our military still have contact with one another. We can't take, as I told you, we're not trying to decouple from China, but what we're trying to do is change the relationship for the better.
Biden also warned that the United States was wary of investing in China due to Beijing's business practices. Positive momentum from November 2022 talks between Xi and Biden in Bali was derailed when the United States shot down an alleged Chinese spy balloon, delaying a planned visit to Beijing by US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping arrived in San Francisco last night, a day ahead of his highly anticipated meeting with American counterpart Joe Biden. Xi last traveled to the United States 6 years ago and is due for a lengthy talks with Biden in their first in-person meeting in a year. The two presidents are meeting on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation APEC summit as both countries seek to stabilize ties. The forum brings together 21 economies, which together account for about 60% of the world economy. Xi stepped out of an Air China plane and was welcomed on the tarmac by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and California Governor Gavin Newsom. Supporters gathered in San Francisco ahead of Xi's arrival, as did protesters who spoke out against his leadership. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called for Pacific Rim nations to be free to choose their own partners, a veiled criticism of China on the eve of a presidential summit. Blinken, addressing ministers from the 21-member Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation APEC forum in San Francisco, quoted a 2020 statement of the group that called for an open, dynamic, resilient and peaceful Asia-Pacific community.
APEC is a powerful forum to convene, to collaborate, to build consensus on the economic future for people across our shared region. Our engagement with APEC underscores the United States' enduring commitment to the vision that we all agreed in Malaysia in 2020, an open, dynamic, resilient, and peaceful Asia-Pacific community.
The United States has accused China of using economic pressure and growing assertiveness at sea to press countries that have disputes with Beijing. China, in turn, has criticized the U.S. role in Asia, particularly its military alliances, arguing that Beijing historically has been the dominant player. However, both countries have voiced hope in different ways of bringing more stability to the fraught relationship between the world's two largest economies. For the Palestinians trapped in Gaza under Israeli attack, the start of the rainy season yesterday has piled on even more despair, as many find themselves homeless or living in the makeshift tents, with the prospect of flooding causing apprehension about the spread of disease. At a UN shelter in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza, displaced people were gutted when they saw the clothes they had put out to dry the previous night had only been drenched by the rain. The World Health Organization, which has already sounded the alarm about worrying trends in disease spread in Gaza, said it was very concerned at the prospect of rain causing flooding and overwhelming the enclave's damaged meager sewage facilities.
We're very concerned. We've already got outbreaks of diarrheal diseases. We've already got recorded well over 30,000 cases when we would normally expect 2,000 cases in the same period. And this will just add further to the suffering. We've got so much infrastructural damage. We've got a lack of clean water.
Overwhelmed by the daunting scale of the humanitarian needs of Gaza's 2.3 million people, 8 organizations have so far been unable to plan for the challenges created by the rain and flooding. Gaza's main hospital, Al-Shifa, has been forced to bury dozens of dead patients in a mass grave. Its director, Muhammad Abu Salmiya, said thousands of Palestinians were trapped inside by fierce combat. Doctors at the Gaza's biggest hospital said patients and people taking shelter were also stranded in horrific conditions in the facility. Muhammad said there were bodies littered in the hospital complex and there was no longer electricity at the morgues, adding that 179 bodies had been interred so far. He also said that 7 babies and 29 intensive care patients were among those who had died after fuel for the hospital's generator ran out. A witness said the stench of decomposing bodies was everywhere in the Gaza City facility as bombardment and gunfire echoed constantly in the area. United Nations estimates that at least 2,300 people, patients, staff and displaced civilians are inside and may be unable to escape because of the fierce fighting from the facility where supplies are nearly exhausted. The health ministry in Gaza says Israel's relentless assault has killed more than 11,300 people, also mostly civilians, including thousands of children. In a related development, the United States said it would like to see safe evacuation for patients at Gaza hospital to get out of harm's way and will support an independent third party to conduct those evacuations. Speaking at a news briefing, U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said Washington did not want to see any civilians, certainly not babies in incubators, and other vulnerable populations caught in the crossfire. Miller added that the U.S. was in conversation with humanitarian organizations and third parties on the possible evacuation.
The Secretary has made very clear that we condemn extremist violence and harassment against Palestinians, that we think the government needs to do more to rein it in, and they need to do more to hold people accountable, and we will be watching to see what steps they take.
Still to come, Northern France communities in state of disaster. Stay with us. Thailand has rolled back plans of joint patrol with Chinese police in popular tourist spots after public backlash. Initially, tourism officials on Sunday floated the idea of having Chinese and Thai police patrol much visited areas to build confidence among tourists, including Chinese nationals. The plan, however, sparked uproar online, drawing criticism that it compromised national sovereignty and a rebuke from the country's police chief. Tourism Minister Sudawan Wangsufa Kosol on Tuesday said there were many alternative ways to build confidence for tourists in the country, but there would not be any joint patrols as the Thai police force was already adequate and are working hard to restore confidence. Thai authorities have rushed to tighten security after last month's shooting spree at a luxury mall in Bangkok, in which 2 people, including 1 Chinese national, were killed, fan safety concerns. Restoring confidence is critical for Thailand's tourism industry, especially among Chinese visitors. They accounted for 11 million out of record 29.9 million foreign tourist arrivals in Thailand in 2019, but their return after the COVID-19 pandemic has been sluggish, prompting the government in September to waive visa requirements for Chinese nationals. So far this year, Thailand has welcomed 23.2 million foreign arrivals. Around 250 municipalities in northern France will be declared in a state of natural disaster due to massive flooding. President Emmanuel Macron said this as he visited affected areas, fearing further rises in the water level. Communities in the Pas-de-Calais and North departments have suffered days of heavy rain, rivers breaking their banks and floods, and the water may rise further in the coming days before some residents have even returned to their homes. Macron said that the government would grant access to a €50 million support fund for affected towns and villages. The region has suffered in quick succession the effects of Storm Ciarán on 2nd November, record water levels in rivers on 7th November, and heavy rain on Thursday and Friday. On Tuesday, Weather Authority Meteo France placed Pas-de-Calais on orange alert, the second highest for heavy rains and flooding, while all 7 of the department's rivers are at the same alert level. Schools have been closed in 279 municipalities for the second day in a row. From Christmas gifts to ship, residents forced from an Icelandic town damaged by hundreds of earthquakes in recent days were able to briefly return to retrieve their belongings. The southwestern town of Grindavik, home to around 4,000 people, was evacuated last Saturday after magma shifting under the earth's crust caused hundreds of earthquakes. The seismic activity damaged roads and buildings in this town situated 40 kilometers southwest of the capital Reykjavik. After waiting for hours in their cars, residents could only enter their homes for just a few minutes to collect their valuables, with Icelandic police and civil protection vehicles on standby. Iceland, which has 33 active volcanic systems, has declared a state of emergency, with shelters and help centers open in several nearby towns. Such evacuations do not happen often, as the last evacuation of an entire sizable settlement in Iceland occurred 50 years ago during the 1973 eruption on the island of Heimaey off the south coast of Iceland. Grindavik is the country's southwestern Reykjanes peninsula, home to Fagradalfjall volcano. 3 eruptions have taken place near Fagradalfjall in March 2021, August 2022 and July 2023, all far from any infrastructure or populated areas.
76 minit tanpa henti. 76 minutes non-stop. Transparent and concise.
Paparan komprehensif, ringkas dan padat. Saksikan Kanta 744, 7.44 malam.
Berita perdana 8 malam. Malaysia Tonight, 8:30 p.m.
Mali's army has recaptured the strategic northern town of Kidal, a stronghold of Tuareg-dominated separatist groups that has long posed a major sovereignty issue for the ruling junta. The capture of Kidal is a significant symbolic success for Mali's military leaders who seized power in the year 2020. Violence has escalated in the north of Mali since August, with the military, rebels, and other groups vying for control as the UN stabilizing mission, MINUSMA, withdraws from the country and evacuates its camp, triggering a race to seize territory. The news of war was greeted by celebrations in the capital Bamako as dozens of people gathered on Independence Square waving Malian flags. The government of neighboring Burkina Faso also welcomed the news, calling it a pivotal moment in the fight against armed groups in the Sahel region. The rebels also issued a statement admitting they had lost their stronghold town but vowing to keep fighting. The army and the state have for years been virtually absent from the town of Kidal, which has been controlled by the predominantly Tuareg armed groups, but the junta had long signaled its determination to retake it. Financial reparations are long overdue to Africans and the diaspora as compensation for the enslavement of people of African descent. Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo said this on the first day of a conference on how to address such historical injustices. According to a list of planned outcomes on its website, the event is expected to produce an African-led action plan for reparatory justice, establish an African committee of experts to oversee the plans, implementation, and boost collaboration with the broader diaspora.
So it is time for Africa, 20 million of whose sons and daughters had their freedoms curtailed and sold into slavery, also to receive reparations. No amount of money can restore the damage caused by the transatlantic slave trade and its consequences, which will span many centuries. But surely, this is a matter that the world must confront and can no longer ignore. And even before these discussions on reparations conclude, the entire continent of Africa deserves a formal apology from the European nations involved in the slave trade.
From the 15th to the 19th century, at least 12.5 million Africans were kidnapped and possibly transported by European ships and merchants and sold into slavery. Those who survived the brutal voyage ended up toiling on plantations under inhumane conditions in the Americas, mostly in Brazil and the Caribbean, while others profited from their labor. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed reiterated his pledge not to invade neighboring nations over the Red Sea, but insisted that his government would not abandon its demand for port access. In a televised speech on 13 October, Abiy said that landlocked Ethiopia is a nation whose existence is tied to the Red Sea, a key waterway for global trade. Since then, Abiy has sought to elevate regional fears, telling a military parade 2 weeks later that Ethiopia will not pursue its interests through war. Ethiopia lost its coastline after Eritrea broke away from Addis Ababa and formally declared independence in 1993 following a 3-decade war. It enjoyed access to a port in Eritrea until the two countries went to war in 1998-2000 and since then has relied largely on Djibouti for imports and exports. Abiy won a Nobel Prize in 2019 for his repro-Kemen the previous year with Eritrea, whose troops later backed Ethiopian forces in a 2-year war in Tigray. But relations have appeared strained since the Tigray conflict ended in November 2022. Liberians voted yesterday to decide whether to hand former football star George Weah a second term as president despite a mixed record or elect political veteran Joseph Boakai. The runoff, which followed a first round of voting on 10 October, was expected to be close between the two rivals, who also faced off in 2017. The Electoral Commission has 15 days to publish the results. More than 2.4 million people are registered to vote. There were no reports of major incidents of violence. The head of the ECOWAS Election Observation Mission to Liberia, Atiru Jega, praised the calm and order prevailing in the various voting centres visited around Monrovia. The peaceful election was also commended by former Vice President of Zambia, Neves Mumba, who now leads the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. Last month, Wea 57 and Boakai 78 came out virtually neck and neck on more than 43% of votes cast, with the incumbent 7,126 votes ahead overall. The elections are the first since the UN in 2018 ended its peacekeeping mission, created after more than 250,000 people died in two civil wars between 1989 and 2003. 10 out of 12 opposition candidates in Madagascar yesterday called on voters to shun a presidential election scheduled for tomorrow amid concerns about the voters' regularity. The move is likely to worsen political tensions that have been running high in the country for more than a month. For weeks, the Indian Ocean island nation has been shaken by a fierce battle between President Andre Rajoelina, who is running for re-election, and most opposition leaders who have complained about an institutional coup to favour of the incumbent. Since early October, the opposition grouping has been leading nearly daily unauthorised protest marches in the capital. The demonstrations that have on average drawn a few hundred supporters have been regularly dispersed by police. 6 presidential candidates had already told the media that they plan to boycott Thursday's vote. Now the call on voters to stay away from the polls has been formally endorsed by all 10 members of the group. Last week, the head of the lower house of parliament, who leads a mediation group to find a way out of the crisis, called for the suspension of the election, saying the situation in the country does not allow for a free and credible vote. Next in sports, Holger Rune claims first ATP Finals win. Stay tuned. Women doubles shuttlers Pearly Tan and M. Tina returned in style to clear the first round of the Japan Masters in Kumamoto yesterday. The duo, who last competed at the Asian Games in Hangzhou, China, had skipped all the tournaments in Europe last month to give time for Pearly to heal from her back problem. The world number 13, Pearly and Tina, went the distance to beat Lee Yu Lim and Jing Shun Chan of South Korea 21-14, 20-22, 21-18 to set up a meeting against Rui Hirakomi and Yuna Kato of Japan next. Meanwhile, it was over for Vivian Hu and Lim Chiu Sin as they went down 17-21, 11-21 to Japan's Rina Miura and Ayoko Sakamoto in the first round. In an all-Malaysian men doubles opening match, seniors Ong Yu Sin and Teo Yi Yi defeated Man Wei Chong and T Kai Woon 21-16, 21-7 to get off to a blistering start. They will play the winners of the match between Cheng Bo-yang Li Yu of China and Thailand's Pranyu Kosamang Warapol Tongsa Nga next. In the men's singles, Liu Junhao failed to clear the qualifying tournament after losing to Takuma Obayashi of Japan 23-21, 21-16 in the second round. Earlier in the first round, he had beaten Takeru Kai of Australia 21-7, 21-3. In tennis, Stefanos Tsitsipas retired after just 3 games of his green group clash against Holger Rune at the ATP Finals on Tuesday, handing the Danish debutant his first victory in the event. Greek world number 6 Tsitsipas looked stiff and uncomfortable as he trailed 2-1, and after consulting with a doctor at the changeover, he decided that he could not continue. Tsitsipas, who lost in straight sets to Jannik Sinner in his opening match on Sunday, shuffled off the court to a few jeers from the large crowd inside the Pala Alpha Tour and later confirmed it was a problem with his back. As a consolation for the ticket holders, alternates Taylor Fritz and Hubert Hurkacz were scheduled on court to play an exhibition match, although it would not count for the tournament. Had Tsitsipas withdrawn before the match first reserve, Hurkacz would have played Ruud in a live match, with the Pole still having a chance to progress in the tournament. Tsitsipas previously claimed the biggest title of his career at the event in 2019. Italian champions Napoli appointed former manager Walter Mazzarri as their new coach. According to the Serie A club, the 62-year-old takes over from Rudi Garcia after defeat by Empoli left last season's champion on 21 points, 10 behind leaders Inter Milan in the standings. Napoli have lost 3 of their opening 12 league games, the other defeats coming at home against Lazio and Fiorentina, and having drawn another 3 sit 4th, 2 points behind third place AC Milan and 8 adrift of Juventus in second. The lackluster start to the season reached a crescendo on Sunday when Napoli lost 1-0 at home to Empoli as Garcia tactics failed to produce a result against a team currently 17th in the standings. Garcia took charge at Napoli in June after Luciano Spalletti resigned, having won Napoli's first Scudetto since 1990, but they are now at risk of falling away in this season's title race. At the same stage last season, Napoli were unbeaten in Serie A, leading with 10 wins and 2 draws. Mazzarri returns to Napoli for a second spell after he managed the team from 2009 to 2013, leading Napoli to their first piece of silverware since returning to the top flight with the 2012 Coppa Italia before finishing runners-up to Juventus in Serie A the following season.
Rakyat Malaysia memang hebat kerana tegas pertahankan hak Palestin. Memang kita jauh dari dunia Arab. Kita jauh dari dunia Palestin. Kita jauh dari Gaza. Tetapi setiap detik berlaku menyentuh hati nurani kita. Kerana apa? Karena kita tahu dan faham arti manusiawi, arti ihsan, arti kemanusiaan, dan lebih penting arti keadilan melawan kezaliman Israel.
That ends our bulletin today. Wrapping up with a recap of our top story. Malaysia can help reduce tensions between superpowers. Tune in to Malaysia Tonight coming up at 8:30 p.m. on TV1 and saluran Berita RTM. We'll leave you with the visuals of Las Vegas preparing for the weekend's F1 race. From river to the sea, Palestine will be free. I'm SAHIH Samsudin, Malaysia Madani, tekad perpaduan penuhi harapan.